Thanks, everybody. Sorry that there was a little delay. We're going to continue on the second part. This is going to be more focused on the infrastructure and rack, ASM, data guard, um, pluggables, partitioning, and just lots of new features. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the first 45 minutes on going over a lot of those features, and then Rich is going to finish it off by the last 15 minutes. And hopefully I won't go too long. All right. Right. So this is a little about me. You guys have seen this, right? The key area that I focus on is on the rack, Exadata, ASM, Linux, Hadoop, virtualization. And one of the key things that we've done this year is that we partnered up with SharePlex, and we're doing a lot of the complex data replication and integration that's evolved with things like zero downtime and upgrades. One thing that I haven't mentioned also is that I'm the current president of the Cloud Computing SIG for the IUG. And as a result of it, we're promoting a lot of the Oracle Cloud initiatives. And that's why I happen to know a lot about Oracle Cloud. Right, so other areas that we focus on is Exadata and obviously Rack. And we're doing a lot of the expertise and pushing expertise on SharePlex and doing the brand awareness for SharePlex data replication, right? So we kind of went over this earlier, but we focus on the Exadata and a lot of everything that circles around Exadata, with the database migration to database upgrades, doing replication with DataGuard and SharePlex, doing lights out monitoring and managed services. I do a lot of shell scripting, do a lot of Perl, do a lot of automation. I do things like cloning 2-node racks, cloning 4-node racks. We wrote a rack provisioning software for Wall Street, where we were able to clone a 4-node rack from scratch. That's basically 4 servers with nothing on it. We were able to build out a 4-node rack that was fully patched with the latest PSU, configure ASM, install Oracle software, and create a pristine golden image database in 45 minutes on a 4-node rack. Wow. And so we do a lot of those kinds of automation. Right? And so again, as you see before, everything that you see in green is what you should be interested in. Those are all of our webinars that we do. And today, obviously, we're doing the 12 new features on for New Zealand and Australia, and Rich is going to help in the end do a lot of the 12.2 features as well, focused on the database and for development DBAs. Tomorrow is another webinar that Niemiec Van Gerlicher, another one of our partners, is focusing on, and he's going to show how to deploy PeopleSoft from on-prem to Oracle Bare Metal Cloud Service. And another key thing is that if you look at September, I'm doing a deep dive on Recovery Manager. Basically, it's going to be things like, how do I never do backups again? I mean, how do I never do full level 0 backups again, right? Leveraging technologies like incremental updates forever, right? So that we never do level 0s. How do I do, for example, if I'm in data guard situations, if I lose an archive log, right? How do I do incremental updates from my data guard? So we'll go over a lot of those things, advanced topics that a lot of DBAs want to know about. Right, so in this particular next 45 minutes, I'm going to go really fast. So go through the upgrade considerations for 12.2, go through rack, ASM, ACFS, and skip the general purpose, go straight to DataGuard, pluggable database, and finish it off with RMAN. Right, so 12 days of 12.2, covered before last year. We have a lot of articles on 12.2, and you can go to our Viscosity NA website and download the articles, right? We also did a deep dive article on DataGuard, and you can download the deep dive white paper from there. Also download the Bare Metal Cloud Service from our website, also from Oracle. Another thing that we just started is that I think Rich I'm going to butcher his last name. Not Jim. Jim Kaprensky, right? I'm gonna butcher his name. I knew I would, right? And so he and I did a 2-hour hands-on lab at Oracle Development Tools User Group this year, and we're going to continue with that, and we're going to do a full day pluggable database workshop at in September in Virginia, and um, and as a result of it, we're going to come out with a book at Open World on pluggable databases, right? And so it's going to cover mainly 12.2, but we're going to call it a lazy DBA's guide to mastering multi-tenant, right? And so for those who are interested in DataGuard, there's a lot of DataGuard stuff in here as well. You can download it from those 2 websites that I have. And here are some of our books. The most recent one is Rich's books right here on 12.2 performance tuning. We are, for example, doing a release update for our virtualizing Oracle Business Critical Databases. We're going to print 1,000 copies of that book, I think, and we're going to do a book signing. Mainly, we're going to promote how we can do a zero downtime migration to a virtualized infrastructure at Open World. Right. I'm hoping that we can do a cloud workshop at Suncoast. Right. We just did one at the Northern California Oracle User Group. Turned out really well. So we want to do one here. We're doing one at the Michigan one in November as well, and we're doing one in Houston in October. Right. So here's a slide. So for those who've been around a long time, right? Back in the 90s, we used to be all command line DBAs, right? And then Google became really popular. And then we have, I call it the Google DBA, right? All the developers are Googling. They think they can do all the DBA stuff, right? And then, right, and then when 9.2 and 10.2 came out, RAC became really popular. Oracle coined the MAA DBA, the maximum availability architecture, right? Exadata came out. We had, database machine administrators, right? And then 2010, VMware became really popular. People were virtualizing Oracle, right? 2011, private cloud, right? Not public cloud, private cloud, right? Doing agility and consolidation, elasticity in your own data center, right? And then in 2015, Oracle Public Cloud became really popular, right? And so now with 2017, with 12.2, right, the pluggable database, DBA, right? That's going to be the wave of the future as well. Okay. And I have a lot of slides on PDBAs I'm going to go through. Okay. Rich covered earlier on 12.2, right? It took literally 6 months before Oracle released it for on-prem. So this is Oracle's cloud-first policy. Right. Going forward from now on, all the new releases go on Oracle Cloud. Right. Then eventually we get it on-prem. Okay. So, so how many of you guys are looking at hybrid cloud, where you have on-prem, right? And so Mark Kerr last year pretty much said the hybrid cloud is going to be around for the next 5 to 7 years. There's going to be few out there that's going to go IT as a service in Oracle Cloud or any other cloud, right? You also saw Mark Kurt interview the CIO at Club Corp, right? And they're going to do IT as a service into Oracle Cloud, right? But the larger companies can't stomach that. Compliance rules prohibit you from going to the cloud. That's why things like Oracle Cloud Machine on-prem is really popular. Exadata on-prem is really popular, right? For that reason, right? These cloud machines, right? And so there's a lot of issues and concerns, right, for inhibiting companies to go to cloud immediately. So, like, for example, if you're in Canada, right, the data in Canada cannot leave Canada. That's their compliance laws, right? But Oracle does not have a data center in Canada. So that means that for them to adopt cloud in Canada, the most likely immediate solution is that they're going to have to go buy one of these cloud machines on-prem, right? And so, and then at the same time, everybody is already on Amazon. You're not going to just get off Amazon and go to Oracle Cloud, right? And also, if you're a Microsoft shop, you're going to lean towards Azure, right? And so we have this concept of a multi-cloud, right? And also, if you go outside the cloud, Oracle Cloud, you have licensing issues like we mentioned before, right? And so let's talk about 12.2 in particular, and talk specifically on upgrading patching considerations, right? How many of you guys are looking at going to 12.2 soon? Okay, started already. Okay, within the next year, for sure, right? Right. basically the pattern. And also a lot of customers are what we call terminal release customers. That means that customers who are on 11.2, right? That's terminal release for 11G, right? Are going to go to the terminal release of 12C, right? Which is 12.2, right? And so majority of the customers fit in that range. They're going to go from terminal release to terminal release. And that's why we see a big shift towards 12.2. And so, as you can see here, right, 11GR2 was released in September 2009. That means 8 years. You guys are upgrading, right? If you are on the 12CR1, right, that's June 2013. That means 4 years. You're upgrading, right? So the upgrade isn't that fast. Okay. How many of you guys use DBUA, Database Upgrade Assistant, right? That's very popular. Right? I personally don't care for it, but that's the best practice that Oracle recommends, right? It does a lot of checks for you, checking for invalid objects, desupported character sets, right? If you have enough resources for rollbacks, table spaces, right? This is actually a slide that I actually borrowed from Rich, believe it or not. And then you have checks for listeners, and whether if some products became desupported, et cetera, right? There's an actual MetaLink note 2189854.1, right? It has a step-by-step checklist if you're planning on using DBUA to upgrade to 12.2. Okay. PSUs are very important too, right? The July PSU came out, right, for 12.102 and also for 11.204, right? We generally recommend you do a N-1 PSU. What does that mean? That means that in July, when it comes out, you don't install July update, right? You install April, right? Unless your upgrade path to production is going to be much longer, right? So if you're one of those customers that start in July, but you're not going to go live until October, then you may not want to do N-1. Just do it when it comes out, right? Because there's some chances that you'll be logging a service request with Oracle to fix some issues if you're going to be the first one on applying their PSU. Okay. So 12.2 changes everything. Okay. In 12.2, we will no longer have the concept of PSUs. Okay. So starting with 12.2, they're going to call it release updates and release update revisions. Okay. And so the release update for 12.2.201 came out in July. Okay. So what does that mean, right? That means that for a release update, right, RUs are similar to our proactive bundle patches that we have today, right? And release update releases are similar to our PSUs that we have today. Okay. Yeah, and so starting with 12.2 also, right? They're going to change the what. Let me take that back. So in the future, the next release of Oracle is not going to be called 13C. The next release of Oracle is going to be called Oracle 18. The release after that is going to be called Oracle 19. Their goal is to have releases every year, right? And within it, right, they're going to have release updates and release update revisions. Okay, and so if you look at this particular MetaLink note, right, here you go. You have a release update, right, and you have release updates that's going to come out for all the operating systems. And just like we have one for database, you have one for grid infrastructure, you have one for Exadata, right? So release updates are only applicable for 12.2. For 11.2 and 12.1, it's still going to be PSUs and whatnot. Okay. So 11.2, I'm going to go back a little bit, right? For DataGuard, they introduced a concept called first patch apply. Okay. This basically means that I can take a PSU, right, apply it on my standby database, perform a switchover, right, zero downtime, right, take the same PSU, apply it to my primary database, and switch back, right? So it allows customers to apply PSUs with zero downtime, right? But it only applies at the PSU level, which means that I can do one-off patches, I can do bundle patches, but I can't do major releases. That means I can't go from 11.203 to 11.204. I can't go from 11.204 to 12.1 either, right? This only applies at the PSU level and interim patches. Okay? And if you're on Exadata, it supports their bundle patches as well. Okay, so if you're planning to go to 12.2, here's a complete checklist. Whether if you're going to do it the manual way, using DBUA, or also if you have multi-tenancy, the upgrade path is different. And there's a last note in the bottom that talks about known issues in 12.2. Okay, the reason why there's a separate checklist for the multi-tenant architecture is mainly because if you're on pluggable databases, your upgrade path is completely different than someone who is not on a pluggable database. Okay, because the upgrade path for a pluggable database is that I'm literally going to migrate my pluggable from a 12.1 environment to a 12.2 and run the upgrade. Right? Okay, so basically, if you're on 11.203 to 11.204, you can go straight to 12.2. If you're on 12.101, 12.102, you can go straight to 12.2 also. However, if you're on 11.201 or 11.202, you must go to 11.204. 11.106, 11.107 must go to 11.204 as well. All the other releases can go to 11.204 or to 12.102, et cetera, right? If you're on 9.208, you have to go to 11.203 or 11.204 to get to 12.2. Okay. If you're on a much older version, however, here's the actual intermediate upgrade path. You guys can look at that later on your own. Okay, so from a preparation perspective, always run the pre-upgrade, right? And look at the fix-up scripts. Okay. Also, on the source side, make sure you clean up all your environments, right? Things like emptying out your DBA recycle bin, checking out your invalid objects, looking at your invalid components, right? Looking at your network performance, and preserving your stats. That's very important, right? Because what is the biggest nightmare that you have after you upgrade? Right? I'm going to have horrible running queries. I might fix 80% of my queries might be running faster, but the 20% might kill my performance, right? And so if you have hairy queries that you can't tune fast enough, take the stats from 11G and plop it over to 12.2 and make it go around under that under the same plan, right? And so this is just the details of some of the cleanup stuff you do, right? Purge the DB recycle bin, right? Check for invalid objects, execute util-rp, right? The whole idea is you need to know how many invalids you started with and how many invalids you ended up with. You need to make sure that Oracle has not deprecated anything in terms of data types, or your stored procedures and packages that are customers are not breaking along the way, right? And these are some of the notes for the validation checks, right? And also things like EM Cloud Control Repository, right? Delete those, right? Some of those older components you can actually go delete, right? OLAP, UltraSearch. Okay, preserving your stats. There's multiple ways to preserve your stats. One of it is to actually extract your stats out of, right? And this allows you to perform AWR diff comparisons later on down the road. Right? Obviously, things like RAT is definitely the way you want to go do it, right? Always set guaranteed restore points before you start your upgrade. Right? Guaranteed restore points are awesome, right? There's a difference between a guaranteed restore point and a regular restore point. Okay, make sure you understand the difference. I don't need flashback for guaranteed restore point. Okay, make sure you have your AWR retention set long enough. So if I'm going to go do an upgrade today, right, I want to make sure that I have at least my AWR retention set to at least 30 days, so that when I run a month in after the upgrade, right, and they start complaining that the upgrade is running slower, I mean that a batch job is running slower, right? You want to be able to have a comparison, right? And having that historical AWR retention is very important to be able to do that. Also, back up your database stats, right? I have routine jobs that back up our stats weekly, right? And puts it into another schema, right? Consider using RAT if you have a license for real application testing, right? There's a thing you can run for, make sure you disable your DDL fire triggers and re-enable them after the upgrade, right? Upgrade your Apex if you're going to do it prior to the upgrade as well. There's some other cleanups you can do for, the database control like I mentioned before, right? And always back up your database. Okay, so that's upgrade considerations. I went really fast, right? Sorry, but let's go straight to grid infrastructure, right? How many of you guys do cloning today? Cloning? How many of you guys ever clone the grid infrastructure? Okay, so, and I do a lot of cloning. I do clones of non-rack, I do clones of rack, right? So cloning non-rack is very simple. It's it's pretty trivial stuff you can do, right? And so what they did in 12.2 is they took the cloning concepts of rack and non-rack, right? And they now provide you the grid infrastructure software as an image for you to download, right? You simply unzip and run a script called grid setup, and you enter all your information, and boom, it's done. So they have significantly streamlined the process and simplified the process. Okay, because if you think about it, how do you go and install Oracle on 50 machines? Right? It's easy if you're just doing one, right? What if you have to go install 12.102, apply the latest PSU, apply the patch for Golden Gate, apply some interim patches, right? That becomes a nightmare, especially if you have to do it on 50 machines, right? But imagine if you can create a tarball of the software that's fully patched, and you literally untar, run, clone, and you're done, right? That's what that concept is. Okay, rapid home provisioning was available in 12.102. However, the documentation wasn't really available at the time. Let me take that back. The documentation was available. People just didn't know about it, right? So in 12.2, they made it a big deal. And so rapid home provisioning is now Oracle's ability to, within a cluster, right? I can go and provision not only the Oracle software, but I can leverage snapshot cloning technologies and provision a database along with it. So think about it. I'm on the OS prompt, right? And I can say, take my production database, right, with Oracle Home, provision this database on the server, right? Oracle behind the scenes will NFS mount the database and the grid infrastructure on that server. Leverage just snapshot cloning techniques. Okay. In 12.2, we have this concept of a rack reader node, right? So every hub, which is every rack node that participates in the cluster, can have up to 64 reader nodes. So people who are doing these read-only databases, right, they can have rack reader nodes, okay? And they've improved significantly on their health framework as well to be able to advise you of your health, the rack health, and looking and providing more details in the activity logs, right? Now in 12.2, right, the rack environments are load aware, right? It's no longer about server-side load balancing and number of sessions, right? It truly knows the CPU and memory utilization of each node in the cluster, and it will actually load balance appropriately, right? The only downside is that you must have database resource manager on, instance caging on, and you must use AMM. And this is what I don't like, right? Is that if you use automatic memory management, what do you lose? You lose huge pages. Yes. And if you lose huge pages, you lose performance, right? And so until they fix that, I won't even touch it. All right, extended clusters. They've provided a mechanism for you to take an existing environment and convert it to an extended cluster or a stretch cluster, right? Stretch clusters are not really popular in the United States, but it's really popular in Europe. All right, ASM. Today, we have the traditional concept of a disk group and a database inside of a disk group, right? And you see a lot of companies do one database per disk group. How many of you guys use the ASM, right? So best practice is to only have 2 disk groups, right? Or 3 if you're on a rack, right? So you have data, you have FRA, and you have maybe OCR boot disk, right? Three disk groups, right? However, a lot of companies we go to have one disk group for every database. Right, that's very common. We see it all the time, right? And the reason why they do it is because things like noisy neighbors, or they want different attributes or different attribute of a disk group, right? Like 11.2 database on one, 12.2 on another, right? Because once I set the compatible of 12.2, right, I can't put an 11.2 database on there, right? Things like that, right? And so to address that, right, Oracle introduced the concept of a flex disk group. And file groups. It's really file groups is what they've introduced, but Flex Disk Group is the foundation for that, to support that. And this gives you the ability to set up a file group inside of a disk group, right? And things like attributes and compatibility is set now at the file group level. Okay, so now this is what it looks like now, right? And so inside a disk group, I set up a quota group. Inside a quota group, I have a file group. Inside the file group, I can have one or more databases on it. Okay, and so also comes with numerous commands as well. Okay, and I'll go over a lot of this as well. A lot of it's basically change file group, change query group, list file group, list query group, right? And then removing as well. So basically, the standard command is list file group for the data disk group, right? And under the file group OB1, right? And this just gives you the high level what it looks like. Okay, and then even from I think I just skipped a ton of slides, but we'll see if I ended up moving that up by accident or not. So they even have full support on ASMCA, right? And so I have the option to create a file group from the GUI as well, and add quota groups as well, right? And also introduced the iOS server, right? And so now I can have outside of ASM, right? I can have databases via the iOS server. Okay. Basically, there's no client configuration. Discovery of Oracle is instantly. Basically, the way it works is that via the member cluster, right, and ASM, it provisions the iOS server via NFS to a server that doesn't have ASM on it. So it leverages the Flex ASM architecture to be able to do this. Okay. How many of you guys use ASM Live? No ASM Live? You guys gave up on that? So in 12.1, Oracle introduced the ASM filter driver. The reason why this became popular was because it's also a kernel module as well, right? However, the ASM filter driver also protects the actual disks from being overwritten by, for example, your system admin, right? So like, for example, right, let's say you're adding a new disk to your disk group, right? What does the system admin have to do? They have to go DD that disk, right? The first 128 bytes or whatever, 256 bytes, right? However, how many times have you seen the sysadmin do it on the wrong disk, right? Especially on a disk that's already part of the ASM disk group. If you lose one disk on an external redundancy, you lose everything, right? However, with the ASM filter driver, when it does that DD, it says, sorry, you don't have permissions to write it. It's protected by Oracle, okay? So in 12.1, it was a chicken and the egg thing, right? Because you have to go install the grid infrastructure, you have to go to ASM CMD, and you have to go, label the disk and everything, and then you can go do the install. In 12.2, it's fully baked in as part of the install process. Okay. Obviously, 4K sector sizes have been supported since 11.2. Now they made it where you can actually set it as a default. Okay, and also things like preferred reads on stretched clusters, right? It's also now automatic. Okay, so like I was telling you before, I can actually set up an ASM filter driver. Notice I can create a data disk group. I can specify it to be of a flex redundancy to be able to do my file groups, right? I can configure the ASM filter driver, right? And I can actually label disks right out of here, right? So ASM Live is still going to be there, but from a consulting perspective, we recommend all of our clients to go this way now. Okay, so ACFS, talk about that real quick, right? Is that we've had snapshots forever, right? But they've added snapshot-based replication between multiple environments, right? And I could even rename an existing ACFS snapshot. Okay, and I can impose quotas on snapshots as well. ACFS now also has support for 4K sectors as well. ACFS, I can do compression. I can put databases on ACFS, and it'll actually compress as well, except for redo, flashback, and control files will not be compressed, right? And so running databases on ACFS is starting to be more and more common. We don't see it as much, but it's, versus almost nothing a few years ago. Okay. Defrag as well. I can actually go defrag an ACFS file system now. Okay. I can resize an ACFS file system, just like I can extend a data file. I can resize an ACFS file system. Okay. So how many of you guys are even looking at ACFS? Right? Golden Gate customers. Golden Gate. Anybody Golden Gate? A lot of Golden Gate customers they really don't have a choice, especially if you're on rack. But and here's basically all the features of ACFS. I didn't cover things like metadata acceleration and stuff like that, but all of our white papers have all this stuff in there, right? Let's talk about some of the performance tuning that we talked about earlier. I'm going to go through this really quick. I have AWR at the PDB level, also have AWR at the data guard level, and I have optimizer stats, right? The key thing is that in 12.2, I have a stats advisor now. Okay. Per process limit, it's also a 12.2 thing, right? I can set it now. It restricts PGA at the session level, right? And I can do a session PGA limit now on 12.2. Okay. The adaptive plans, obviously, like we mentioned earlier, is that I have Oracle changed the default behavior of optimizer adaptive statistics. In 12.1, that was true. In 12.2, they set it to be false, right? And that's mainly because people are turning it off. Index monitoring, right? Every 15 minutes, it causes a flush from SGA down to, but instead of being at the parse level, it's at the execution level now, and it tracks index usage. And the key thing is that not only the number of times, but last time when it was used, and then total times, and much more. It actually has buckets you can look at. It actually, 100, 200, 100, 100 to 200, et cetera, right? You can look at that level of frequency. TDE also will do system and syslocks and undo now. You can even convert table spaces without additional storage. However, during the conversion itself, you'll actually do need some space. And I can encrypt, and I can decrypt. I can even recrypt. Okay. Talk sharding real quick, right? Imagine if you have a partitioning environment, right? I can go and horizontally partition that table across different servers, right? And leverages a shard key. When you log in, you pass that shard key, right? However, you can do much more. You can even do sharded tables, families. Sharded table families, right? If there's a table that have commonality, right? Like parent-child relationships, right? You can actually shard families together, right? You can even do duplicates as well, right? Much like what we do in the Hadoop world, you can have duplicates as well. They even have the concept of protecting a shard with data guard, right? So if you have shard that needs to be highly available, right? You can put that shard on rack with data guard, right? But when you show a query and if you can localize that partition, right, and be able to spread that partition across different servers, right, you have basically unlimited scalability. Okay, partitioning. We will go through this pretty quick. I can convert a non-partition table to a partition table. Read-only partitions, multi-column partitions. The key thing I wanted to note here is that in a external table now, I can create an external table off of Hadoop, off of Hive, right? And so now Oracle is fully embracing big data as part of their database strategy, right? And so it's and the cool thing is that when I create that partition off of an external table, partition pruning kicks in, right? And then that's the biggest value, right? Is that it's in addition to security, it's also the ability for Oracle to eliminate all the data where it needs to go off of different Hadoop file systems, right? And just hone down on the data that it needs to go to, right? And prune that data and thus be able to get to the data much faster. And that's where the value is. Okay. Read-only partitions, right? I can make certain partitions read-write and certain partitions read-only. Right. In the old days, we used to do it with table spaces, right? Put your read-only partition in a read-only table space, right? And then you would actually say backup database, not read-only, right? And then you'll just back up that way, right? But if you think about people who are doing like big file table space on Exadata, they can't create another big file table space just to put another partition in there, right? And so it's ideal for customers like that. And also, if you have 1,000 partitions, you don't have 1,000 more partitions to manage as well, right? Multi-column, right? You can split. You can create multi-column list partitions, right? A better example would be if you have state and city, right? And let's say that someone incorporated a new city, right? It would automatically add that city and state, right? And I can split a partition and move people around into multiple cities as well. I can split a sub-partition as well. Right, so a key thing here is that we have automatic list partitioning now, right? Just like we have interval partitioning. I can defer segment creation for my list partitions and interval sub-partitions, right? And we have a thing that's saying that I can create a table for exchange. Basically, that technology has been there, but now Oracle has built in additional logic and additional intelligence so that it can handle the errors much easier, better. Is a better word, right? So if I have a data type mismatch, let's say data, varchar 230 on a column and varchar 21, let's say 50, right? Oracle will realize you're trying to get to varchar 250 and set the commonality and let you do the partition exchange. Okay. Advanced index compression. Mainly, the key thing is that in 11.2, they added the advanced high. The advanced low was available in 12.1. And 12.2 is the advanced high. It's very much it's similar to what you would see in the hybrid columnar compression, and however, it's a different algorithm, but it does achieve a much better compression ratio. Okay, I went that really fast, and some of my explanation may be a super high level, but I want to get to the data guard as fast as I could. Right. I'm going to start with 12C on the data guard, and I'm going to go from there. Okay. So 12C. How many of you guys have heard of fast sync? We'll start with fast sync first. I know I have far sync first, but fast sync, right? It's in the old architecture. You have log writer, right? And you have LNS, right? LNS will talk to RFS. RFS will write to the standby reader logs, right? Along each step of the way, there's acknowledgments going on, right? So if you look at RFS writes to the standby reader logs, right? And when it's finished written, RFS will notify LNS that the standby reader log occurred successfully. Okay. Notice the key word here: no affirm, right? That means that data guard will not wait for RFS to write to the standby reader logs. So basically, the entire process will go and send ACNAGs except for the disk write part, which will significantly improve performance if you have a slow environment on the target side. Okay, so that's fast sync. Okay, we also have a concept of far sync. How many of you guys know what that is? It was a big 12C thing. So we have a concept of a far sync instance. But let me go one step further, one step backwards, even more. How many of you guys heard of a cascading standby database? Okay, if you haven't heard that, same concept. So in the old days, right, you would set up, let's say you have 10 standby databases to go to, right? Primary database could actually ship to all 10, right? But if you're talking about production databases with heavy workloads, right, you don't want that database to ship to 10 servers, right, for your archive logs. So they introduced the concept of a cascading standby database, where the primary will ship only to the cascading standby database, and the standby database will ship out to the remaining 10 database servers, right? However, you have a full production copy database out there, right? And so what Oracle did was, you know what, we'll eliminate this full copy I gotta have, right? And only put in the memory structures, right? The background processes, right? And the control file and the password file. And that becomes my FARSync instance. So from the primary, I ship to my FARSync instance. From the FARSync instance, it goes everywhere else, right? But one step further is that because FARSync is nothing more than a proxy, if you think about it, right? And so I can have my FARSync instance right next to my primary database server, right? And so now I can have zero data loss capabilities. I can do a synchronous replication with fast sync with no affirm, right? And I can ship blocks from memory directly to my FARSync instance, right? And from there, async out to anywhere else, right? So the whole thing is that I will protect from server loss or even potentially storage loss, right? If I set up my FARSync instance on a different server on a different set of storage. So I protect myself from that. I won't protect myself from a data center loss. But then again, how often do you have a data center loss? And even companies that may have perceived data center loss, we sit there hours and hours and hours before they decide to fail over, right? So with FARSync, at least your data will be protected, right? That's FARSync. SysDG role 12.1, right? It's all about delineation of roles and responsibilities, right? We no longer want to use SysDBA, right? And broker enhancement is things like switchover, resumable switchover. In the event switchover fails, I can resume. I can fix my stuff, issue the switchover command, Oracle will continue, right? DML, I can do DML on my Active Data Guard through temporary tables, right? That's a big one in 12.1, right? I can have sequences now in Active Data Guard. Keyword is Active Data Guard. These are Active Data Guard new features, right? 12.1 also, I can do incremental updates on the standby using TNS. So what does that mean to you? It means that today, if you lose an archive log that you have not backed up, but has not been applied in the standby, what do? You call it today and rebuild your standby? Well, that's the misconception, right? Yeah. Earlier in 10.2, or 11.1, they added this feature where I can do an incremental copy. So I take the SCN on my standby database, right? And I go to my primary and I do an SCN-based backup, right? I take that backup and I ship it to my standby database, and I do a recovery based on my backup, right? And that backup will let you pass beyond that archive log, and then you can go reinstantiate data guard, right? And so in 12.1, they've made it so that with a single command on the standby database, I can go and do that process. Okay. 12.1 also, the current log file part, right? Real-time apply is now standard, right? And also in 12.1, right, I can move a data file, right? How did you do it before? I had to go offline the table space, offline the data file, move the command, alter database, rename file, right? One command does the whole thing for you automatically, okay? 12.2, right? Data guard 12.2, DBCA, I can instantiate a standby database with DBCA. Yeah, that's pretty big, right? However, it doesn't support rack yet, it doesn't support pluggables yet, right? I can even, I don't need TNS because I can use an Easy Connect, and I can also specify custom scripts to run after it's instantiated. Here's an example, right? Data Guard also has SQL Tuning Advisor now and a diagnostics spec. The key thing is this is active Data Guard stuff, okay? Build logging, this is a big one too, right? How many times have you gotten bit on your data warehouse, especially data warehouse? OLTP would typically enable force logging. In data warehouse world, it's very common for us to see just regular no logging. Let me rephrase that. where we don't see force logging enabled on the database. Okay, so a lot of times developers will actually do unrecoverable activities, right? So what do you typically have to do? You got to rebuild your standby, right? Well, not in 12.2. I can go to the standby database and I can issue the command recover database no log block. Right, and it'll actually take all the non-block, no logging blocks and fix those. Okay, in 12.2 also, we have a concept of a multi-instance redo apply mirror, right? Meaning that either all of the rack instances can participate in redo apply, or a number of rack instances can participate in redo apply. 12.1, only one instance can actually do managed recovery. Okay. 12.2, I can have up to 3 observer processes. Okay. A lot of people would say that having only one observer process, right, which is single point of failure, especially if you're dealing with fast start failover. Okay. Henry, you guys are looking at fast start failover. Okay, right? So you have an observer process typically at another data center. What happens if your observer process dies? You don't have fast start failover, right? So in 12.2, they allowed you to have 3, just like scan, right? Except it doesn't work like scan. It doesn't load balance. There's a master observer process, and the 2 are your standby. In the event the master dies, you could designate the second one, or you can tell Oracle to pick whatever is surviving. Okay, and there's numerous views you can figure out as well, which is in the screen. Okay, subset standbys. If you're on pluggable databases, right, I can have a subset standby. Right. So what does that mean? Is that in 12.1 it's all or none, meaning that every pluggable database had to be part of the standby. Right. In 12.2, I can just list out, here's all my standbys that I want, all my pluggable database that I want to be part of my data guard. Or I can say, I want all these except this. Right. It even accepts wildcards as well. Okay. And here's some examples here, and I won't go through that. Okay. Active data guard also no longer has to be disabled as part of rolling upgrades. Okay, 12.1 had to disable data guard, the data guard broker, right? Now in 12.2, the broker no longer needs to be disabled. Okay. Oracle also introduced a package called DBMS DB-Comp to look for lost writes and to identify discrepancies between the primary database and the standby database. Okay. And with it, right, you have full PL SQL example here, or you can use a validate database out of the broker. Okay, and if you look at validate database verbose, which is here, you can see here that it does check for no logging operations and corruptions and missing files and et cetera, right? And that's what we're looking for. Okay, password synchronization. This is an area that breaks a lot of data guard for people who are new to data guard, right? When you change the password for sysdba, sysopper, sys, right? The password file in 12.1 is not updated, right? Which means that on data guard side, it will not apply to archive logs, right? And so in 12.2, however, right, when you update these, right, as part of the redo apply, you'll actually update the password file now. Right, and so it's a little bit of minor stuff, but they're finally taking care of the low-hanging fruit, right? However, for far sync instances, you still have to copy the files manually, right? But once you copy it, it will propagate to the rest of the data guard configurations. Okay, in memory is fully supported in Active Data Guard, and the cool thing now is that because you have another Active Data Guard environment, right, you can have different configurations between source and target for memory. Okay, I'm going to go quickly past fast start failover since you guys are not into it. I can do a duplicate database for FarSync now, right? And also when I do a switchover now, right? All the previous sessions will stay connected in 12.2. In 12.1, it will disconnect and it'll force you to reconnect. In 12.2, it will actually preserve the states. Okay, data guard command line interface has all the support, not all, a lot of the support that like you have in SQL Plus, spool, right, rem, slash, set time, right, et cetera, right? Automatic failover, right? I can specify now and I can list my fast start failover targets right here, or I can tell it to go and designate one to be any. Okay. A ZDLRA. How many of you guys know what ZDLRA is? Zero Data Loss Recovery Appliance, right? So basically, this was introduced by Oracle a few years ago, right? And this appliance will go and literally absorb, consume, ingest your databases, right? As for backup targets, right? But not only that, it also, just like what we do in DataGuard, right? It will take your archive logs and your redo stream, right? Real-time redo stream. It'll actually ingest that as well, right? But it's not a total tuning feature, but it was announced at the same time. The ZDL array will also do an endianness conversion of your database and also of your redo and archive as well. What does that mean? That means that you can convert from AIX to Linux almost instantly via the ZDL array. Okay. Broker support for pluggable is now also in there as well. Switchover. Now I can do a switchover and I can tell it to wait, right? So right now when we do a switchover, what do? As part of the prep, we kill all the sessions, right? And I can just tell it to drain the sessions. 12.2 has built in that capability, okay? RMAN is pretty much the ability to remap into a different schema, but also at the same time, it checks for space along the way, okay? I'm gonna go through pluggable real quick. Pluggable, it gives you the ultimate scalability. In the magic quadrant, right? It's the highest in agility and highest in efficiency. And the reason why is because even though schema consolidation is the free option, I don't have to worry about namespace collision. What does that mean? Things like public synonyms, right? I don't have to have a local synonym for every schema that I'm doing, right? Multi-tenancy option addresses all that. The other thing a multi-tenancy option addresses is security. If I'm logged onto one multi-tenant option, I cannot see another multi-tenant database, right? When I remember when multi-tenant option first became available, I was like, yeah, it's like SQL Server. You know, you got an instance and you got multiple databases, but unlike SQL Server, now we have ultimate isolation now, and I'll address that in these slides, right? And so now with 12.2, we have additional functionality, right? In 12.1, I had to unplug and plug in a pluggable database, right? Now in 12.2, I just relocate a pluggable database. And I relocate while the database is online. Not only does it move a pluggable database, it actually will also relocate the connections to the new database as well with zero downtime. Okay. Hot clones, refreshable clones, I'll go through that real quick, right? And so with 12.2, right, we've really evolutionized, right, the pluggable database, right? It used to be a cold remote clone. Now we have a hot clone, right? And we even have a concept of a refreshable pluggable database. Okay, and I can relocate a pluggable also. Okay, sorry, that's a duplicate slide. Oracle changed the number of pluggable databases maximum from 254 to 4096, and the major reason why they did it was because in their cloud, they were actually seeing over 1,000 pluggable databases. Remember the Exadata Express, right? You get a pluggable database, right? So they've literally had thousands of pluggable databases for a single container. Okay. Hot clone is your traditional, right? I can move a pluggable or copy a pluggable from one area to another area with zero downtime, right? The read-only refreshable is a really big one. I can actually take a production copy of my pluggable database, right, and create just like what we used to do in the old days. How many of you guys do materialized views? Yeah. Everybody knows what that is, right? I can do a refresh of a materialized view, right? Read-only materialized views, right? I can do that with a pluggable database. So think about that. I have a 1 terabyte production database, right? I can go create a refreshable read-only. Keyword is read-only, right? Just like a materialized view, I can create a read-only, refreshable, pluggable database in my development environment, right? And I can tell it to update let's say every night, right? Every night it will actually refresh itself. So it'll be current exact image of your production, right? From there, if I have snapshot cloning technologies, I can provision dev, QA, pre-prod instantly, minutes, boom, 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 right? Or I can do full clones off of that. So it really will change how we do refreshes. Okay, so I have the concept here. The CRM is going to the cloud, right? And from there, I can do snap clones as well. So there's a lot of things about snap clone and Oracle Cloud. A lot of people don't know. In our next release of our Oracle book, Oracle Cloud book, I actually will have a chapter on snapshots and clone in Oracle Cloud. So in Oracle Cloud, you can actually go and take a backup of your database to the Service Cloud, and you can actually do snapshot clones off of that. Right? And you can tell it to just make it a pure thin provision snapshot, or you can tell it to go do a full provision as well. Okay, and the pluggable refresh is just an example that as time progresses over time, I'm able to go do another refresh, and it'll keep in sync, and I'll be able to do my snapshot clone. Okay, relocate is equivalent to doing a full clone, except as it relocates, your connections will relocate with it. The whole concept is zero downtime. Okay. Just an example of the connections moving to the cloud, right? Okay. So also in 12.2, we have a concept of a proxy PDB. Okay. So let's say I relocated my database from on-prem to the cloud, right? And because I relocated it, all the connections go there with it, right? However, let's say I miss something, an Informatica job that still connects to the old database, right? Or some other batch job, right? Schedule M job still connects to the old database. Or even a cron job that runs only once a month that I forgot, right? Well, I can create a proxy database on the server where I move the database off of. Okay, and the keyword is it's a proxy database. Only system, sysaux, temp, and undo table spaces reside there. Right? Everything else goes to the target pluggable database. Right? And the key thing is that with the proxy, it supports full DDL. Unlike database links, where you can't do DDL, on this proxy, I can even create table spaces on it. When I issue the create table space command, it actually will create it on the proxy server, from the target server.
When you recite system table space, which one is actually?
You actually specify whether you want it there or here. You actually have that, right? And so a practical use case, right, is that what I like is that, let's say I want to monitor all my development databases, right? I can have one proxy server, like my OEM server, right? And from it, I can go monitor, have a proxy for all of my development and QA databases, right? And I can go log onto one server, right? Have you guys heard of the containers in clause in pluggable databases? So a single containers clause, I can go issue one query across every one of my pluggable databases. I can get all the results that I'm looking for, right? And so from a monitoring perspective, right, I can go and use a proxy database concept, right, and log onto one machine and monitor basically my entire environment. Right? Also, like I said before, we have customers as we move databases off from source to target as part of the data center migration, for example, right? They make us leave on SharePlex or Golden Gate there, just in case they miss some jobs, right? And 6 months later or 3 months later, they let us turn it off, right? I can just stick a proxy database on there, boom, we'll be done. Right? The refreshable pluggable database, right? You could do a poor man version of Active Data Guard, right? It's not more like 10, 15 minutes. That's if you have really close proximity, right? A realistic one would be like 30 minutes to an hour. Right? I can refresh a pluggable database, right? But I can have a read-only database that's available without having Active Data Guard licenses. Right? And obviously, it changes my paradigm shift for doing development refreshes. Okay. Oracle introduced a concept of clean restore points. Right. So first of all, now in pluggable world, I can do restore points in pluggable databases. In 12.1, it was all or none. I can only do restore points at the container level. 12.2, I can do it at the pluggable level, right? So I have your typical restore point. I have your guarantee restore point. Now we have a concept of a clean restore point. Okay, this is when you put the database in mount mode before you create a restore point. Okay, and the cool thing about a clean restore point is that it's truly transactionally clean, meaning that I shouldn't have to do a reset log. All the other restore points have to go do a reset log. Right? And so basically this is a process flow. It's identical on the pluggable world as it is in the non-pluggable world, right? The key thing to note is that I have to enable archive log and flashback of the container. Okay. And this is just the command line example of doing a flashback at a pluggable level, right? And I'm creating the restore point guarantee flashback, right? And that's what you want to do. You always want to use guarantee flashback. You don't want to have to rely on your flashback logs. Right? Flashback on, container, my restore point, create an SCN, close, flashback, and open recent logs. Right? In 12.2 now, we have the ability to have localized undo at the pluggable level. Okay, and because I have the localized undo, it allows me to have flashback at the pluggable level. Okay, also in 12.2, right, I can now have granularity in my pluggable database. I can set SGA level parameters, DB cache size, share pool size, PG aggregate target, SGA min size, SGA target at each of the pluggable level as well. Okay. The only recommendation, initial general recommendation, is that total of all the SGA min size should not be greater than 50% of SGA. Okay. So let's look at this. Right. I'm going to go through this really quick. Okay. So flashback at the PDB level, right? Now at the PDB level now, I can have different character set as long as my container is at a Unicode character set. Okay. Now my number of pluggables went up from 252, 254 to 4K, right? I can have AWR at the pluggable level, right? I can set memory and IO limits and even CPU at the pluggable level. So CPU count also now is set at the pluggable level, right? I can set SGA target at the pluggable level, right? I can set IO resource limits at the pluggable level. So in essence, I have completely isolated every component of resource at the pluggable level, right? And so I can actually containerize it and limit any kind of IO, so I don't have noisy neighbors anymore. And that's what the differentiator is, right? Also, at the same time, I'll go through what we call lockdown profiles, right? Because we are in the world of pluggable databases, pluggable DBAs, right? Imagine, how many of you guys are development DBAs? Cool, right? Most of you guys are production DBAs or system DBAs, right?
Yeah.
So when a developer comes and wants to be a DBA, right, they want all the DBA privileges. Do you give it to them?
No.
Right? Because what does a developer want, right? They want all the privileges, but they don't want the responsibility, right? And that's the reason why they're not a DBA, right? They want all the privileges, but they don't want the late nights. They don't want the weekends. So they're developers, right? So when they ask for privileges, you want to give them certain privileges to be able to do their job more effectively, but you want to also take out certain privileges, right? And the alter system is a perfect example, and I'll show you why. Okay, so like we said before, you can set all these parameters now at the PDB level. There's DB cache size, share pool size, that we have general recommendations that these should not be greater than 50% of the CDB level settings. Okay. Um, you can set CPU count now in 12.2 at the PDB level, 4,096 PDBs per CDB, right? We have the concept of a pluggable DBA now. We can have localized AWR, have PDBs at different character sets, but also PDBs can also be set at different time zones, right? And now we have ADO and heat maps at the PDB level. Okay, so things like different character set, different time zones, right? Those were big inhibitors for consolidation, right? So now you just take that out completely. Now it becomes purely a compliance issue. Why you cannot go to a pluggable database? Why you cannot consolidate? Okay, so at the I/O level, right? Now I can set parameters called max IOPS, max IOs per second, and max megabytes per second, right? And I can also set MISGA min size at the pluggable level as well. Now we're talking about things like reservations, shares, right? These kind of concepts that we talk in virtualization is now, coming up, percolating in the pluggable world now, right? So maximum IOPS, right, is IO requests per second, just like what we expect, and megabytes per second. You can throttle the IO now at the pluggable level, unless you're on Exadata, because remember Exadata has its own IO resource management, and you don't want to get in the way of that. Okay. And so this is in the wrong place, but key thing is that 12CR2, even though it's in the wrong place, it checks when you do a recovery table whether the space is available or not. Okay, but so I apologize, that is in the wrong place. So earlier I said that we want to take and give example the alter system command to a developer, right? But we don't want to give them all the privileges of the alter system command, right? And so the alter system command, here's some of the privileges that it has, right? One thing I didn't put in here is the ability to kill session, right? But you have cursor sharing, change the optimizer mode, you can do DDL, parallel degree limit, et cetera, right? But if I give that to a developer, he has everything. But what if I can take out certain parts and only give him the 3 things that he needs to debug his PL SQL, right? This is what we all want to do, right? Only give him the PL SQL stuff, nothing else, right? I can do that now, right? But notice what Oracle did. They only do it for the pluggable database. Right? So it makes you want to go buy this. Right? So one last thing, and I'll let Rich go on. So notice this feature. It's a 12.102 feature. Right? When 12.102 came out, there was a full page summary on the new features of pluggable databases, with probably another 100, close to 100 pages of the details of it, right? So in 12.102, they introduced this concept, this Perl script. And what this Perl script does, it gives you the ability from the operating system to run commands across every pluggable database that you have, right? You can run SQL scripts, or you can actually run actual SQL against it, okay? Generates log files, and you can even tell it to go across the root as well, okay? And so basically, this is an example of running a SQL script and passing it through the catcon.pl script that resides in Oracle Home RDBMS admin directory. Okay, and the next example, which I'm going to end with, gives you an example of how to run the actual SQL, embedded SQL select statement or any kind of statement across all the plug databases. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go and escape and give this to Rich. This one? No, I think it's this one. Oh. Here we go. I'm going to go and window. I'm going to go change it to Rich. Okay, I don't know if it's going to work.
don't know how this goes. Okay, hopefully if you can hear me. If you can't, sorry about that.
Yes, I can hear you very well.
What's
and
that?
see yours. We can hear you.
Let me ask him.
Yeah, we can hear you and we can see it.
We go back to PowerPoint.
We hope. All right. So what am I going to cut? First, I'll put this up. Hopefully those of you in Australia can hear me. And New Zealand. I was going to say, when I first saw the Sydney Bridge, I found out you can climb over that, walk over the top of it. So I asked my wife if she'd do that. She's like, I don't think so. So then I checked, and it was all booked up 100%, and so I couldn't do it. Then she called my son that night, and she said, yeah, your dad wanted to walk over this bridge, but it was all booked up. So he asked her, he said, well, if he finds an opening, are you going to walk over? She said, if he finds an opening. Lo and behold, of course, I worked very hard, and I found an opening. So we walked over that bridge. So I put this up in case somebody wanted to write that down. If you're wondering if you've been here a while, this is 10, 12 minutes is what I timed it at. We'll see how I do today. I guess I didn't start my timer. I'm going to cover these. To some of you, this will be a review, or you can learn these things in more detail. It's going to be short. It's going to be quick. You'll probably know it. Oracle has had about half the market as long as I've been in the world of Oracle. 12CR2 has now increased things. You can see object names have increased in size. Tabled space names and pluggable databases are still a smaller size. This has been done. These have been increased so that Oracle can migrate other databases and you can consolidate a lot more databases. Here's an example of that. Create long table name identifiers. You can see I'm doing that. Australian, New Zealand database DBAs are real cool. Oracle also has a history command. I remember the first database I asked Bruce Scott, who is the Scott Tiger, just to let you know, Tiger was his daughter's cat. And Bruce Scott is Scott Tiger. But I said, how was it, the first database? I said, I heard, it had so many errors you couldn't get the data in. And he said, Rich, we can get the data in, but it was the Roach Motel of databases. We could not get the data back out. So their history has come a long way. So if we look at the history, we could see now we can do a his command. This is a pretty long time coming, if you ask me. You can see here where I have 3 different statements. I could delete the third line. I could run the first line, and you can see here's just the output from that first line. Works very well. Set the hist on, set it to a certain number. Another nice feature is fetch a certain number of rows. When you're the beginner DBA, all they let you do is tune. So I would do a lot of row numbers less than 5. Now I could say, instead of row numbers less than 11, I could say fetch the first 10 rows. It gives me a stop key and fetches those rows. I can also offset to go to the middle of the table, and that's a whole lot better yet, because now I can see the tuning from the table in the middle of the table as well. Another great feature, only in 12C Release 2, approximate query. And what this does is an aggregation of distinct values. And we'll see it's extended in 12C Release 2. In 12CR1, you can look for within 97% of a certain value. So what are the sales? What departments have $1 million in sales, but within 97% with 95% accuracy? That's what it will do. It will do it much faster. You can see instead of a select count distinct, now I can do an approximate instead. And I have to set on, if I set an init or a parameter, you can see here at the very bottom, set that to true, and it will make all distinct counts approximate. In 12.2, I can do that with distinct detail, approximate count, distinct aggregate, medium, percentiles. So I can do a whole lot more, and I can also, and 12.2 also has support for materialized views and query rewrite with approximates. Maybe the best feature of Oracle is its security. A lot of people say, hey, I have this great NoSQL database, and it also has label security, or it also has fine-grained auditing. but it doesn't have, 20, 30 different ways where you can do things at the row level, you can do things at the column level, you can do that at the person level, you can do encryption in different ways. And then it added to that in 12C, you could see with PDB type of security where it extended that security, and then also gave you in 12.2 table space encryption and full database encryption. And you can see an example here to encrypt. Now I can encrypt things like system, sysaux, undo, alter table space, sysaux encryption online. It also uses different types of encryption as well. And then underneath that, how to decrypt that. The in-memory column store is new. As you're a beginner DBA, you're kind of like, you're doing help, kind of like help history. Then you get a little better, and they give you a little more security. Now they expect you to do everything, off the top of your head because you're getting faster and faster. How many people feel like they just can't take any more? It's going so fast. Anyone? I remember one day I was doing that, and I had 2 other partners. I was like, I don't even know if I could take another day. And I'm reading this article, and it says 1 out of 3 people are mentally unstable. And I thought, wow. I knew it was bad, but not 1 out of 3. And then the next slide, I was like, I don't think I can believe that. The next slide was, don't believe us? Take this simple quiz. And I thought, okay. Think of 2 people And I thought of my 2 partners, and it says, are they, mentally unstable? And I was like, no. And it says, if it's not them, it must be you. So you've gone from having a high level of security, doing things in a very careful way, and now you've got to do them all in memory very quickly. Oracle's in the same way. Transactions go very fast because they're in the buffer cache. Uses the least recently used algorithms. The hot data stays in the buffer cache. The cold data moves out. A very large table never makes its way in there. So what if you want 1 column and you want to do data warehousing? Becomes slower. Oracle has competitors like Netezza, like Teradata, who focused on columnar storage and actually focused on making data warehousing fast. So what did Oracle say? We're not going to change to a columnar storage database because that would make transactional data very slow. So what did they do? They added 2 separate memories. They allow you to do only a column, the entire table, whatever you want, but they make it much smaller because they compress it. And then they use storage indexes, which they got from Exadata. And they use something they borrowed from gaming called SIMD to make it even faster. And it's populated right up at startup. There's some things that you have to remember here, 12.102 or later. Not installed. It's installed by the database by default, but not enabled by default. You have to set in memory. Once you set that, you bought something, so be careful. Keep that in mind. You also have to increase the memory for memory target or SGA target if you use these to incorporate that new added 100 meg you've set up here if you set it to 100 meg. You can also dynamically resize it to become larger in 12.2. Do it at the table space, partition, subpartition, no indexes, no IoTs, no cluster tables, no sys, no longs. Sure, it'll grow. Create table, you can put it in memory. Alter a table in memory. To do a specific column, I would just put the column after department number in parentheses. Dept, paren, depno, and paren in memory. And here's an example. I set it in memory, and notice now the in-memory is enabled when I go to user tables. If I run a query, I can actually check, is it working? And I can tell you out of all the people I've known, once they set this up, including me, you run this query, it's not in memory. Like, what did I do wrong? And you go back and you've missed some step. Alter a table space individually in memory. You can alter a table to take it back out of memory. When it runs out of space, it's out. So you have to move stuff back out of memory to reuse that space. And here's an example of modifying a partition and moving it out. Notice that a partition table automatically inherits whether it's in memory or not, but you could take that partition back out if you wanted. You can also do virtual columns. I won't go into detail here. We could also take a virtual column in memory and it puts it in a separate area called the in-memory expression unit. In the same way in the in-memory expression unit, I also have JSON documents can be loaded and optimized in an in-memory binary format way. So very powerful for the development side as well. I'll do faster joins because the join group can be created. You can see I'm joining on store ID, and I'm compressing that and storing it in memory. So when the join happens, it doesn't even uncompress it. You could also do an in-memory fast restart because it can write what's in memory to a lob and then use that lob to repopulate when things are done. Some of the partitioning, Charles went over a lot of this. The only one, a couple I wanted to add, convert a non-partition to a partition table. You can do it online, and it also maintains the indexes as well. I can alter a table, move it online, move a partition online, move a sub-partition online, and again, update those indexes. And note, with update indexes remain usable during the move operation. In big data, a lot of people use external tables to store their big data to make it more secure because a lot of these either NoSQL databases or Hadoop file systems are not very secure. So they find a way to go through Oracle, use the security of Oracle, and then point specifically to these other databases. With Oracle, Oracle's extended this so you can partition those external tables now as well and do all the things that you could do with partitioning. The last thing I wanted to mention, here's just Larry. Charles covered this very well. Announced this. Oracle's all in on the cloud. You could listen to anyone out there. If you don't believe Larry or Mark Hurd, talk to your salesperson. I bet they'll say the word cloud in the first or second sentence. It's just my prediction. If you do go to the cloud, you get a lot of features, and they're included in the price of the cloud. So when you look at the ROI of cloud, look at that full pricing and compare it to other things like Amazon. Oracle has shown it is much less expensive. And Charles talked about places that you can use that. I won't go through that again. But a nice way to go. Cloud, Oracle, try it. It'll get, this screen will come up, $300 in free credits. Do I want to use it for the database, for compute, for storage? Want to use maybe Ravello, mobile, Golden Gate, MySQL, whatever you want to use it for. The Internet of Things. There's also a lot of other quick tours and demos. And you can see some of them below, different applications that you could try out, which is very nice. Very easy to do. Click on Create a Service. Once you sign up for $300 in credits, I'll take an Oracle Database Cloud Service. There it is. I'm going to pay by the hourly. I guess I'm doing a free trial. I'm not going to pay it all, I hope. I'll do release 1, but you can do release 2 as well. You can see different things, extreme performance, high performance. The higher you go on this, I can tell your credits are going to run out much faster. Mine ran out very, very quickly. We'll just leave it at that. And here I'm specifying how many CPUs, how much memory I want, and then I'll have that available. In this case, I built 2 databases. One was very large and it started terminating on me because I used 16 CPUs and I ran out of credits. There's also a pull-down console where I can use Enterprise Manager. But Exadata, what Oracle has figured out is you can either have it as a capital expenditure, we'll give it to you, you use it, just like they do now, or put it in the public cloud, and Oracle will manage it, and it'll be an operating expenditure, or we'll put it on site for you, and it'll be Oracle managed, but in your data center. I think things are coming very fast. Anybody here, how many people have ever seen Twilight Zone? And the crowd is about, it's 90% of them. No, not really. About 30%, but they're not all raising their hands anymore. It's very long. We had a presentation before you guys came on. You watch Twilight Zone, you'll say, when I was a kid and I watched this, I thought these things weren't going to happen for 500 years or 1,000 years. You will see most of the things in Twilight Zone have already happened, or they're very close. You could already see they're just a few years away. So you're literally in the Twilight Zone at this point. You just don't realize it yet. And the reason why is because a directly addressable memory is growing so fast. It's not a linear thing. And if you look at addressable memory growth in miles per hour, I put Windows at 1 mile an hour. The internet, which was the jump to 32, 65,000 miles an hour. The next jump, 300 trillion miles per hour. The next jump, 5 trillion billions miles per hour. You can look at the internet and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe how big that was. And then now you could look at since then as we go to 64-bit, and they're doing things like 3D printing, 4D printing even, where the printing can actually change once you print the object. And you can do gene editing, and change the genetics of somebody. You can do a 3D printed kidney maybe, and they've implanted in a mouse before, and it's worked. And you could see that next jump of 300 trillion miles per hour, it's happening. They're getting to implants. The prosthetics are getting very good to where, is the arm on the prosthetic even better than in my regular arm? Does it help the other worker? How fast is it coming? Robotics. It's not coming, it's here. You have to look at, if you could live at any time in all of history, you would want to live right now. You'd look into history, but I wouldn't want to live there. .com crashed. After all that, then it came back up. Then it went even faster. This is the best time of all to live in history. God has figured out that you should be here right now. What is it that you should be doing? How to leverage this? How should you be leveraging this incredible acceleration? But I always figure I'm going to go to Honda. It's going to pour me a cup of coffee. I'm going to get a surgery on the way. If it's a big company, they can afford that, and they're going to carry me to my meeting. This is stuff that's here now. This used to look advanced. Look at this. I got the, let's see, Captain Kirk. He's the captain, so he knows a lot. You get the red alert. Got the yellow alert. Got the all clear. I can call Scotty, tell him dot enough power. Come on, Scotty. And then I can call Bones, and that's about it, right? And it seems so complicated. Then you have this communicator. Just think if this phone just came out today, you would be like, yeah, I don't think so. What is that thing from back in the 90s? But think back when you were a kid, how advanced this looked. And look at it now. That's how fast things are moving. Now it's ghost in the shell. They're talking about hacking into people's brains. And if I could give you prosthetics, but your entire body is a prosthetic, and I could image copy even your brain, every thought you ever had, and move you over. This is what was in the Twilight Zone. It's coming fast. Sometimes people are like, I can't expect a miracle all the time. I say, you got to expect a miracle in life. I mean, you just happen to be in the time where actually you could live one. It's possible. The technology has advanced so fast that it's possible. Make a living by what we get. Make a life by what you give. The only thing that would be better than if you lived in this period of time is if you had a little experience first, like 10, 20 years, 30 years, where you really became good at what you did so that you could really fully live in this time. Oh, that's right. That's you. Don't miss it. Don't believe there's a miracle. I'm telling you, some things you just think are impossible. I was supposed to go to a company event where I was speaking, of course. I was the main speaker. And I walked out. I ran a little late. I never do that, but it happened on this particular time. No, I do all the time. But anyway, I'm walking out and I'm thinking I got to catch a cab, and it's raining. And I'm like, oh, I'll never catch a cab. And as I say that, and I'm walking out, I got 2-3 minutes to get there. It's, I don't know, a couple of miles away, only 2 miles away or so. But walking in the rain is not a good thing in my suit and so on. So a cab goes by at that very second that I'm thinking, this is impossible to get a cab. And there he goes with nobody in there. And I'm like, taxi! And he just keeps going. I'm like, taxi. But he gets a red light. So I run up to the light, and it's maybe, 15 years ago now. I think I was president of IOUG at the time. And I'm looking in the window, and I'm like, taxi! And he looks over at me, he's like, all right. And I'm thinking, well, it's probably off duty. I don't know. So I get in the car, and he's like, okay, where are you going? I'm like, I'm just a couple of miles to there. And he's like, all right, I'll take you. And he takes me there. And I get out, or I'm about to get out, and I'm like, well, how much is it? And he goes, well, notice there's no meter. And I'm like, wow, there is no meter. Why is that? He goes, because I'm a pizza delivery guy. And it had a sign on top. It looked like a cab, but it was pizza delivery. And I'm like, why did you take me? He said, you were just so insistent. He chased me down, down the block. He said, if he's not going, he thought, if he's not going too far, he goes, I'll take him. Now I look back and I go, you know what? It was Uber. I had the idea. He's probably the guy who started Uber. Follow us online. So I want to thank everybody here for coming. I want to thank everybody everywhere else for coming. I'll leave that slide up. Thank you, Charles. I enjoyed speaking with you. And thank you, Troy, for having us here. And thank you guys in Australia and New Zealand. Do you want to add anything there, Charles?
No, thank you very much,
All right.
everybody, for coming.
And we'll leave you that and have a great day.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, gentlemen. Awesome as always. Always enjoy it.
Sorry we kept you so late.
Yeah, right.
But you are DBAs. You weren't DBAs, so
Yeah,
we thought,
right.
let's give them the real presentation.